The old man's voice was barely above a whisper. Pretend to be my daughter, just for a moment. She almost didn't hear it. Standing in a crowded place, surrounded by strangers, she had no reason to trust him, no reason to get involved. But something in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't fear alone. It was urgency, and a quiet kind of hope. What she chose to do next didn't just change his day. It changed everything. She had been in a hurry, focused on her own thoughts, when she noticed him sitting alone. His clothes were clean but worn, his hands slightly shaking as he held onto a small bag. People passed by without a second glance, but he kept looking up, scanning faces like he was waiting for someone who never came. When their eyes met, he hesitated, then called out softly. She almost kept walking. "Please," he said, his voice careful, respectful. "Stand here with me, like you know me." It sounded strange, even risky. Her first instinct was to step back, to protect herself from something she didn't understand. But there was no aggression in him, no pressure, just a simple request that carried more weight than the words themselves. She took a slow breath and stepped closer, keeping a safe distance but close enough to be seen together. "Okay," she said quietly, unsure of what she had just agreed to. The old man relaxed slightly, his shoulders lowering as if a heavy weight had shifted. He didn't explain everything, not yet. Instead, he simply stood beside her, his posture a little straighter. A few moments later, two men appeared nearby, scanning the area with sharp eyes. They paused when they saw him, then looked at her. Something changed in their expressions. The tension in the air was subtle but real. She didn't speak, didn't move. She just stayed there, exactly as he had asked. After a few seconds, the men exchanged a glance and walked away. Then did the old man let out a quiet breath he had been holding. "Thank you," he said, his voice steadier now. She turned to him, confusion clear on her face. "What was that about?" she asked. He looked down for a moment before answering. "I didn't want to be alone when they found me," he admitted. "Sometimes, people treat you differently when they think you have someone standing with you." His words landed softly, but deeply. She glanced in the direction the men had gone, then back at him. In that moment, she understood something simple but powerful. It wasn't about pretending. It was about presence. About what it means to stand beside someone, even for a moment, when they feel like they have no one. The noise around them continued, people moving, voices blending together. But for her, everything felt quieter now, slower, more real. She didn't walk away. Instead, she stayed. The old man's words came out soft, almost lost in the noise around them. "Pretend to be my daughter, just for a minute." He stopped, unsure if she had heard him right. People brushed past her, conversations overlapping, footsteps echoing across the floor. It would have been easy to ignore him, to keep moving like everyone else. But something about the way he said it made her pause. Not fear, not confusion. Something quieter, something real. She turned back slowly. He was sitting on a bench, shoulders slightly hunched, hands resting on a small, worn bag. His eyes met hers again, and this time he didn't look away. There was no demand in his expression, no pressure, just a simple request that carried more meaning than she could immediately understand. Second, her instincts told her to walk away. She didn't know him. She didn't know what he wanted. And in a place full of strangers, getting involved rarely felt like the right choice. Her feet didn't move. "What do you mean?" she asked carefully, keeping a bit of distance between them. Her voice was calm, but cautious. The old man glanced around before answering, as if making sure no one was listening too closely. "Just stand with me," he said. "You belong here, with me." Words were simple, but his voice carried urgency, the kind that doesn't need explanation to be felt. She hesitated. Her mind ran through every possible reason to say no. It didn't make sense. It wasn't safe. It wasn't her responsibility. But then she noticed something she hadn't before. Hands were trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from tension. His eyes weren't just asking for help, they were asking not to be left alone. That changed something. She took a slow breath and stepped closer, stopping just beside him. Not too close, but enough to make it clear they were together. "Like this?" she asked quietly. He nodded, a small, grateful movement that said more than words could. His posture straightened just a little, as if her presence alone had given him something to hold onto. For a moment, nothing happened. The crowd continued to move, voices rising and falling, the world carrying on without noticing the quiet shift between them. She felt aware of everything. The space. The people passing by. The fact that she had stepped into something she didn't fully understand. But she stayed still, just as he had asked. Then she noticed it. Two men standing a short distance away, watching. Not openly, not enough to draw attention, but enough to be felt. Their eyes moved between the old man and her, as if trying to figure something out. Her body tensed slightly, but she didn't move. She didn't break the moment. Simply stood there, steady, as if this was exactly where she belonged. Seconds stretched longer than they should have. Then, just as quietly as they had appeared, the men turned and walked away. The old man's shoulders dropped almost instantly. Like he had been holding his breath the entire time. A quiet exhale escaped him, and for the first time, the tension in his face eased. She looked at him, confusion still clear. "What just happened?" she asked, her voice softer now. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked ahead, watching the space where the men had been. Then, slowly, he spoke. Just needed someone beside me, he said. And somehow, that simple sentence carried more weight than anything else. She didn't step away. Even after the tension faded and the two men disappeared into the crowd, something held her in place. The old man's words echoed in her mind. I just needed someone beside me. It sounded simple, but it didn't feel simple. Not anymore. He looked around, half expecting those men to return, but the crowd had already swallowed them. Everything looked normal again. People walking, talking, focused on their own lives, as if nothing had happened. But standing there next to him, she knew something had. Who were they? She asked quietly, her voice steady but searching. The old man adjusted his grip on the small bag in his hands. He didn't look at her right away. Instead, he watched the moving crowd, as if making sure they were truly gone. People who don't ask questions, he said finally. His answer wasn't clear, but it wasn't meant to be. It carried enough truth to be understood. She frowned slightly, trying to piece it together. And me standing here, that changed something. He nodded. It made me less alone. He paused, then added, and people treat you differently when you're not alone. That stayed with her. She glanced at him again, really seeing him this time. Not just as a stranger who asked for help, but as someone who had learned something the hard way. His clothes were neat but worn. His posture careful, like he was trying not to take up too much space. Everything about him felt quiet, but not weak. Just cautious. You could have asked anyone, she said. Why me? This time, he looked at her directly. Because you stopped, he answered. No hesitation. No overthinking. Just truth. That caught her off guard. She hadn't thought much about it. She had just paused. To him, that pause meant something. Meant she saw him when others didn't. A moment of silence passed between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like something was slowly unfolding, piece by piece. You don't have to stay, he added gently, almost as if he didn't want her to feel obligated. Already done enough. She could have left right then. Walked away, gone back to her own life, her own plans. No one would question it. No one would even know. But her feet didn't move. She sat down beside him. Tell me what's going on, she said, her voice softer now, but more certain. The old man seemed surprised for a moment, like he hadn't expected that. He looked down at his hands, then back at her, as if deciding how much to say. It's not a big story, he began slowly. Just a long one. She gave a small nod. I'm listening. He let out a quiet breath, not heavy like before, but thoughtful. Like someone finally being given space to speak after holding things in for too long. Around them, the noise continued, people passed by without noticing. Time moved forward like it always did. But for both of them, something had shifted. What started as a simple request was turning into something neither of them had planned. He took his time before speaking again, as if choosing his words carefully. Because he didn't know what to say, but because he wasn't used to saying it out loud. Sat quietly beside him, giving him that space, not rushing him, not interrupting. For the first time since she noticed him, he didn't seem like he was bracing himself. He seemed heard. I used to have a place, he began slowly. Home. People around me. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. His voice stayed steady, but there was a softness in it now, like he was walking through memories he hadn't visited in a while. Over time, things changed. People moved on. Some forgot. Some just stopped coming back. He listened closely, her eyes on him, but her mind painting the picture he was describing. A life that once had structure, connection, now reduced to quiet moments on a bench in a crowded place. I learned something after that, he continued. When you're alone long enough, people start to see you differently. Not always in a bad way, just differently. Like you don't belong anywhere. He paused for a moment, looking down at his hands. Once that happens, it's hard to change how they see you. She felt that. Not from experience, but from understanding. The idea that presence alone could shape how others treat you. That being seen with someone could change everything. So those men, she started, then hesitated. They were watching, he finished gently. Not just me, but like me. Trying to figure out where we fit, or if we fit at all. There was no anger in his voice. Just truth. Quiet acceptance of something he had learned to live with. She glanced around again, seeing the crowd differently now. It wasn't just movement anymore. It was distance. People passing each other without really seeing one another. It made her wonder how many stories like his existed right in front of her every day, unnoticed. But when you stood next to me, he said, turning slightly toward her, that changed things. Even if it was just for a moment. She didn't respond right away. She was still processing it. The idea that something so small, something she almost didn't do, could carry that much weight. I didn't do anything special, she said quietly. Gave a small, knowing smile. That's the thing, he replied. You didn't have to. That stayed with her more than anything else. A silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, growing quietly between them. The kind that doesn't need constant words. She looked at him again, really looked this time. Not as a stranger anymore, but as someone whose story mattered. Someone who had simply needed a moment of connection in a place where it was easy to feel invisible. Without realizing it, her role had shifted. She hadn't just pretended to be his daughter. Moment, she had become the one person who chose not to walk away. The space around them hadn't changed, but the way she saw it had. What once felt like a crowded place now felt full of distance. People were still moving, still talking, still passing by without a second glance, but she noticed something she hadn't before. How easy it was for someone to disappear in plain sight. Shifted slightly on the bench, her posture more relaxed now, less guarded. The old man sat beside her, no longer scanning every face that passed. The first time since she noticed him, he seemed still, not tense, not waiting, just present. "Do you come here often?" she asked, her voice gentle, more curious than cautious now. He nodded slowly. "Sometimes," he said. "It's easier than staying in one place too long." He paused, then added, "Here, at least, there are people. Even if they don't see you." Understood what he meant. Being surrounded by noise didn't always mean being noticed. Sometimes it just made the silence feel deeper. She looked at the small bag he had been holding the entire time. It rested carefully in his hands, like it held more than just belongings. "Is that all you have?" she asked, not out of judgment, but out of quiet concern. He glanced down at it, then back up at her. "It's enough," he replied. There was no sadness in his tone, just acceptance. That answer stayed with her. For a moment, she didn't know what to say next. Not because there was nothing to say, but because she was realizing something she hadn't expected. This wasn't just about helping him for a minute. It was about seeing someone fully, and deciding what to do with that awareness. "You don't have to keep moving like that," she said after a pause. "There has to be somewhere you can go. Someone who can help." Gave a small smile, not dismissive, but understand. "There's always somewhere," he said. "Not every place feels like it's meant for you." She didn't argue with that. Instead, she let the words settle. A few steps away, a group of people laughed loudly, completely absorbed in their own moment. The contrast was clear. Different lives, different realities, all sharing the same space without ever truly crossing paths. Here, on that bench, something had crossed. "Oh," she said slowly, "when you asked me to pretend, I almost said no." He looked at her, not surprised, just listening. Didn't understand it. It felt strange. Maybe even risky, she admitted. "But now, I think I get it." He waited, giving her the space to finish. "It wasn't really about pretending," she continued. "It was about not leaving you alone in that moment." Nodded once, a quiet agreement that didn't need more explanation. They sat there for a while longer, not rushing to end the moment. The connection between them wasn't forced. It had formed naturally, built on something simple but rare. And for the first time that day, she wasn't thinking about where she needed to be next. She was exactly where she needed to be. Time passed, but neither of them seemed in a hurry anymore. The rush of the place continued around them, people coming and going, voices blending into a constant background noise. But on that bench, everything felt slower, more grounded. What had started as a brief moment had quietly turned into something meaningful. She looked at him again, this time with a sense of clarity she didn't have before. "What's your name?" she asked softly. He seemed a little surprised, as if the question hadn't come up in a long time. "Samuel," he replied after a short pause. She nodded, letting the name settle. She started, then smiled slightly. "Well, I guess for today, I'm your daughter." For the first time, he let out a quiet laugh. It wasn't loud, but it was real. The kind that comes from feeling something you didn't expect to feel. "That sounds nice," he said, his voice warmer now. He sat there in a comfortable silence for a moment, no longer strangers in the same space. There was something simple about it, but also powerful. A connection built not on history, but on choice. After a while, she glanced at the time, then back at him. Reality was still there. Life hadn't paused completely. Leaving didn't feel as easy as it normally would. "I can't stay forever," she said gently. He nodded. "I know," he replied. There was no disappointment in his voice, just understanding. "You've already given more than I asked for." She took a small breath, then reached into her bag. Not in a rushed way, not out of obligation, but with intention. She pulled out a small piece of paper and wrote something down. Then she handed it to him. "If you ever need someone to stand beside you again," she said quietly, "you won't have to pretend." He looked at the paper, then back at her, his expression softening in a way that said more than words ever could. "Thank you," he said, and this time, it carried depth, not just gratitude, but recognition. She stood up slowly, adjusting her bag over her shoulder. A moment, she hesitated, then placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Not out of pity, but respect. "Care, Samuel," she said. "You too," he replied. As she walked away, the noise of the crowd seemed louder again, the movement faster. But something inside her had changed. She wasn't just another person passing through anymore. She was someone who had stopped, someone who had seen. Behind her, Samuel remained seated, but not the same as before. His posture was different. His gaze steadier. The space beside him, once empty, now carried the memory of someone who chose to stay. That was the part no one else noticed. Not the crowd, not the people rushing by. But for him, and for her, that brief moment of connection had done something lasting. Because sometimes, all it takes, is one person willing to stand beside you, even when they don't have to.